Hello, hello, and welcome to the Canadian Football Countdown. I'm Ryan Coop here alongside Trey Colbeck and Adam Stewart. Welcome one and all to our Week 2 preview show here on the Canadian Football Countdown, taking a look at the storylines, the fantasy options, and the best bets available for Week 2 in the CFL. Something happened here with my camera. Where did I go? I'm back. Hello. There we go. I'm not sure what happened there. Well, that took the steam out of it, but we are here live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, or if you're catching this in the podcast feed afterwards. Hello, happy to have you here as we talk through Week 2 in the CFL. Before I bring in the rest of the panel, I do want to mention we are a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network. And as always, want to acknowledge that the Canadian Football Countdown is brought to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as from Treaty 4 territory, traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis Nation. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Game Time TV. Check out facebook.com/GameTimeTVMB for more on our presenting sponsor. Now let's bring in the other members of the panel. First, it's the great Adam Stewart. Adam, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I don't know. Tell me in 20 minutes here after the Tampa-Colorado series. I'm not sure really quite yet, just because I think it's tied 3-3, unless I haven't checked the score again lately. But yeah, it's getting to be a barn burner down in Denver.
Yes, the start of the Stanley Cup Finals, my Tampa Bay Lightning going against Adam's Colorado Avalanche should be a lot of fun and a lot of fun football to talk about here as well. Also joining us to do so, the great Trey Colbeck. Trey, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, guys. No skin in the hockey game, but we're really looking excited to your guys' little banter as we're recording over the third period here. So let's get it going.
Right on. Well, we've got a lot to talk about here as we preview week number 2. So let's start off with the storylines for each of these games. Adam, take it away with game number 1 here. What are the main storylines for Montreal and Toronto, the first game of the week, Thursday night?
Well, of course, it's Toronto's home opener starting at 5:30 Central. Going to be a good game in Toronto. Hopefully the crowd comes out to this one just like they did to BC, and we have a full house in Toronto. Maybe I can hope. Earlier in the week, of course, some of the storylines in this one, Montreal is going to be with William Stanback. This will be his first game without him for quite a little while here. And over on the Toronto side of ball, there's a lot of new faces on this team. Mcleod, Bethel, Thompson's your starting quarterback. You've got Brandon Banks in there now, coming over from the much unfavored Hamilton Tiger Cats from back in the day. Also, you've got Andrew Harris, one of the best running backs, probably, arguably, one of the best running backs in the Canadian Football League, coming over to Toronto this year. Guys, which player are you most excited about seeing on the Toronto Argonauts and how they're going to fit in with the Argos?
I'll go with Speedy B. I think he's the most interesting. I am interested in Harris, but I'll leave that one for Ryan to talk more about. But I just want to see how Brandon Banks was. The last couple of Grey Cups have been not his greatest games in his long CFL career. So I want to see how he bounces back this year with the new team and see how it goes. How about you, Ryan?
Well, first of all, I want to give a quick shout out to a guy in the YouTube chat here, Simon Potter. He followed a lot of my fantasy content last season, and happy to see him over here following along with our weekly preview. We'll talk a lot of fantasy stuff later, and I'm sure we'll talk about each of these guys as part of it. But I am also interested in seeing what Andrew Harris does in in Toronto. I'm used to seeing him in Winnipeg. But to me, it's Mcleod, Bethel, Thompson, because he, like I've said on our preview shows, he has been the 1A, 1B kind of backup guy going into camp year after year here. And I think he's got some qualities to show that he is the number one guy. He had a full training camp, an extra week of preparation to do so. He's got some great talent surrounding him here. I know a couple of guys are injured, but I really this is a make or break year for him, it feels like, right? Because now it's his shot. He's got everything he needs to succeed. Can he go out there and do it? We know what Andrew Harris is capable of. We know what Brandon Banks is capable of. This year we see what Mcleod, Bethel, Thompson is truly capable of.
No, I have to agree. I think the one guy that I'm most interested, though, of is to see what Brandon Banks has left. I'm sure he wants to prove himself after kind of a down year last year in Hamilton. Wants to make sure that he's still known as one of the best receivers in this league. And I think he's got a point to prove. He wants to probably go out there and say to Hamilton, hey, just like Jeremiah Mazzoli, look what you guys are missing right now. So I think really myself that Brandon Banks is the guy that I'm going to be really watching this week. Be interesting to see what we say about him in fantasy later on here. So the second little story that I've got for you, and I'm going to only go one storyline per team, guys, just so you all know out there. We did 3 last week. It got a little long. So I'm going to do 2, one for each team. For the Montreal Alouettes, again, like I said before, Vernon Adams had a very good game last time. Same thing with William Stanback. And I guess the owner, Gary Stern, decided to say, geez, we're pretty good. We don't have William Stanback anymore, but you know what? We're still going to go out and kill the Toronto Argonauts. Now, if you didn't see me I put kill in quotations. Got a little bit of grief from that. The Argonauts, I guess, might get a little bit of locker room board material. Guys, what did you think of Gary Stern trying to hype up his Alouettes?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. What is he going to go out there and do and say, oh, yeah, I think we'll win by a rouge, or I think we'll win by a field goal. Kill was maybe a bit of a strong word here, but I like the owner hyping up his team. They, especially coming off a week, they had a close loss against Calgary. They lost the biggest piece, arguably, on their team in William Stanback. Get the owner in there, give him a rallying cry, and let's go. Now, hopefully this doesn't backfire and lead to rallying the Argos a little bit against them. But I kind of like this from Gary Stern here. What about you, Trey?
No, I love it too. That's the stuff fans like to see. Again, maybe the word kill 2022, we might have tried to, do something different, but I still love it. That's what you want to see. It's all that UFC, WWE talk that, makes people watch those sports, right? You do want to see it in other sports. So I would love to see, I don't know if Tannenbaum's going to come out and say anything for the Argonauts, but I want to see someone high up on the Argonauts executive box there come back with something, maybe, especially if they win.
Well, Tannenbaum will come out and say something on behalf of the Argos, but I don't think it's what any of us want to hear.
I think Larry's done enough talking for a little while now. So, I loved it too. I mean, when you're owner, let's face it, you see what Victor Quee's doing out with Edmonton. He's out in the open and he's talking about his team and trying to get everybody excited and hyped up about the Edmonton Elks. It's great to see Gary Stern doing the exact same thing, just getting guys excited about the Alouettes. And let's face it, they're a pretty good rival with the Argonauts. That's going to be a pretty fun game to watch on a Thursday night. Moving on now is Friday night football, unless you guys have anything else that you wanted to just quickly bring up with the Argonauts or the Alouettes.
The one thing I just wanted to quickly mention was obviously is the change at running back here, because William Stanback goes on the 6-game injured list. He'll be out for a while. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if injury-wise it's for the whole season. Looks like Jeshua Nantwee's the only running back on the roster for this game, but the Alouettes did make a trade this week to bring in Walter Fletcher of the Edmonton Elks. And I said this on Twitter. I love this deal. I was very high on what I saw from Fletcher in the limited time we saw him in Edmonton last season. I would have actually preferred to see him be Edmonton save some money and go with Fletcher at running back this year. They stuck with James Wilder Jr., a great running back in his own right. But if Stanback's out for a long time, it should be interesting to see going forward here, how they balance out the carries between these two guys in Montreal.
Trey?
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I liked what Antwi did at the last week, but again, you have to get depth, and that's a very good storyline to watch. It's kind of gonna have to watch both running backs, I think, because we don't know what we're gonna see with Andrew Harris. So I'm really excited for this game. This was one, too, we'll talk about later with betting. I'm not too sure for a couple games this week how the betting lines are going to go. And this could be one where it could be a 1-point game or it could be a blowout either way. I wouldn't be shocked, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it could go either way on this one here. And with Williams Stanback being injured, it'd be interesting also, like I say before, on fantasy. Would a guy take Antwi? The guy might think about it. It's definitely an option, and he's a fairly reasonable running back. Although I see he's gone way up this week for some unknown reason. Maybe starting or something. Anyways, let's move on to the next game here. That's going to be at 5:30 again Central Time. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers head out over to TD Place Stadium to take on the Ottawa Red Blacks as a rematch of last week. Both teams looked, the Ottawa Red Blacks really looked pretty solid for their first outing. What are you guys expecting to see out of the Ottawa Red Blacks this week? And keep in mind, they're starting to get a few injuries in there as well. William Powell is still questionable. And they got a few other guys in their list that are starters that are very questionable about starting this week. What are you guys thinking about Ottawa for this week? We'll go with you, Trey.
Yeah. I'm again, as a Bomber fan deep down, I'm a little scared. They only won by not too much 2 points last week and coming back into it. And the Bombers have a few injuries of their own they have to sort out. And officially, Alleros has the Red Cross beside him too. So you got to look at things like that. So I don't know. I could definitely see Ottawa winning this game at home and putting Winnipeg at 1-1 and Ottawa getting themselves to 1-1. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, this is where we're going to truly see what Ottawa is made of. Maybe not truly, I guess. It's 2 games into the season. You're playing the defending champs twice here, but we saw them put up a real good effort and probably should have won that game against Winnipeg last week. The thing I'm watching is, can Ottawa fix up those mistakes they made? Because I count maybe, a handful of big mistakes, dropped interception, maybe a penalty taken here or there, that turned the tide of the game just enough for Winnipeg to pull out the win. It's a fresh new team that's trying to build the chemistry here. So how can Ottawa build off of that? You've got a tough matchup against the same team. There was no real footage on this Ottawa team as a unit coming into week 1, whereas you could basically see most of Winnipeg from last season. They lost a couple pieces, sure. But now, okay, you've played against this Ottawa team. If you're Winnipeg, you've got a bit of footage on them as well. So how does Ottawa adjust, clean up those mistakes, and try to take this one at home in the rematch?
Oh, I agree. And I'm just taking a look here on the CFL.ca injury report page. William Powell is definitely going to be out against the against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this week. So Williams will get another start here for the Ottawa Red Blacks. So we'll see what the young guy can do with his opportunities. I think that Ottawa is probably going to be just as strong as they were last week. Let's face it, it's the home opener. It's a little bit more excitement. And I don't know what it is. When you go to Ottawa, it's always a fun place to play in. And I think a lot of teams enjoy going to their trip out to Ottawa. So that being said, over on the Winnipeg side, I think lots of talk has been about Zach Alleros and his health a little bit. I don't see him not playing this game just because it sounds like he's all right. He was more annoyed at the spotter for pulling him, even though that's the job of the spotter. The other guy that's going to be playing this weekend, starting for the Blue Bombers, is Jackson Jeffcoat. What does Jeffcoat bring to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that they didn't have last week against Ottawa? Ryan, you go first this time.
Yeah, that's huge if you can get Jeffcoat back in the lineup. We saw Jeremiah Mazzoli have so much time in that backfield the last game to make those big plays happen. He's also got great legs. He can move around quickly in and out of the pocket. And when you can have Willie Jefferson on one side, Jackson Jeffcoat on the other, and Jake Thomas, Casey Sales, I think it is, in the middle, plus the linebackers you've got there, like, that's going to make a big difference to have guys coming at you from both ends there. So Jackson Jeffcoat, I think, is Willie Jefferson gets probably more praise in the Winnipeg defense than Jeffcoat does. But I think Jeffcoat's just right up there as one of the top pass rushers in the league. So I think that's going to make a huge difference to turn the tide of things. They did great in the run defense last week, not so much in the pass defense. And I think having him back is going to help. What do you think, Trey?
No, yeah, I agree. I was actually really disappointed. Not disappointed, but I just wasn't feeling their pass rush last week. Felt like Jefferson really wasn't in there. The only time I feel like they really got in Mazzoli's face is when they blitz, and 9 times out of 10, he got the ball away for a big play. So I think adding Jeffcoat will definitely be a huge improvement. And yeah, I don't know about you guys, where you guys watch when you're at a game, but I try to watch the D line every play. And like I said, I just felt like Hamilton owned the pass game. They made a good pocket. Yeah, their run defense could have been better, but you don't need much of a run if Mazzoli's going to throw 40 yards to Acklin over everybody, right? So not, Acklin, right? So it's going to, So I think it'll definitely be a big improvement.
It seemed like last year when Willie Jefferson and when Jackson Jeffcoat was in there as a beautiful 1-2 punch for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and that's what got him through a lot and put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks, no matter which quarterback it was, really, for that matter. So having Jackson Jeffcoat back is absolutely huge for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this week. I can't see how they can't put a little bit more pressure on Jeremiah Mazzoli and get him a little bit more uncomfortable in that backfield this week. So anything else you guys want to run through on the Red Blacks and the Blue Bombers? Trey?
No, I'm pretty good. I think it's going to be a good rematch. I'm actually really excited to see, and like I said, I think it could be a coin flip either way who's actually going to come out with this one. So, yeah, I'm pretty set on it.
Ryan, anything else?
Yeah, I think I want to see some players step up on the Winnipeg side of the offensive side of the ball that had kind of down games. We'll talk about that a little more in the fantasy segment later, who I'm looking to see more from there. But all in all, I really wonder what this game's going to bring. We saw an early season head-to-head matchup between Winnipeg and Toronto last season. Winnipeg looked good in the first game, then went into Toronto, and the Argos took the win, big win there. So could we see the same here between Winnipeg and Ottawa?
No, I agree. The one player actually that I'm looking to see step up on this game would be Nick Dempsky. He did not have a great game against the Red Blacks last time, so I expect him to actually have a pretty good game this week. So be interesting to see what happens there for the Winnipeg side of the ball, especially, like you said, on the offense. So our next game of the week is the doubleheader on Saturday, I believe. That will start with the Hamilton Tiger Cats hosting the Calgary Stampeders. That game there in the old Timbit Dome, or also known as Tim Hortons Field. First thing is Dane Evans had congratulations to him, had a healthy baby girl this, I believe it was yesterday. Was back at practice today. But guys, how much do you think that maybe you could throw a guy off in your first game back just because, now I've got a kid on the field? Trey, you go first.
Yeah, as a father of 3 boys, I could definitely understand that. Good for him to be back on the field. Good for his wife or partner, I don't know nowadays, to let him go back out there and take care of the kid on her own first week. But yeah, I think it definitely could weigh on you because you see those guys who go out and have, a 500-yard game, and he might want to try to do that too much for his new daughter. Could be in his head. You don't never know about sleep. Yeah, I do not envy him right now. It'd be tough enough having a 6, 7, 8-year-old and then trying to get your game film and do everything ready, let alone a 2-day-old. So good for him to being out there. But it's the game off the field for him this week. Ryan?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to be more in his head. Obviously thinking about that or thinking about the beatdown he took from the Saskatchewan Roughriders defensive line last week, right? Dane Evans has got to have a bounce-back game here. If they start real slow to this season and you've got, you go a couple games in, he's not playing well. Meanwhile, Jeremiah Mazzoli's throwing almost 300 yards over in Ottawa. The critics are going to keep coming out more and more. And I don't think it's fair to judge that necessarily based on a couple of games. But rough week last week, some big life news, big things to deal with it for him this week. Let's see. Maybe that motivates him to go out there and light it up in this matchup with Stampeders on, Saturday, I believe?
Yep, on Saturday there. So, yeah, no, I agree. I think he'll actually be more focused, if anything, now because let's face it, when he was in Regina, he probably had that in the back of his mind. Geez, maybe I should be at home right now because you never know. Maybe something's happening and then, I got Robertson on top of me. So He had to do, like I said, he probably had a little bit on his mind last week. Let's see if he recovers again this week. And let's hope that he plays the full game instead of having to see Matthew Schultz come in the last series. Speaking of that, Bo Levi Mitchell for the Calgary Stampeders has a foot injury right now. He did full practice all week because I've taken a look at that here on the injury reports. However, that being said, if he shows any sign of any issue, when do you go and say to Bo, we've got Jake Mahar on the sideline? When do you decide to pull the trigger and put Mahar in there? Brian, you go first on this one.
I hate that you made me go first on this one because I don't know, to be honest. I can't just agree with Trey here. It's a delicate balance because Bo Levi Mitchell has earned himself a spot and earned himself a bad game here or there with his record over his career. And I think Bo Levi Mitchell's got a bit of an ego to him also, which may be warranted based on his success level in his career where, okay, Bo starts having a bad game here. How little is the leash? How does Dave Dickinson manage this relationship that he's built over so many years here? Bo Levi Mitchell, even when he's injured, is going to try to still get himself back out there on the field to play in these games. How does Dave Dickinson manage this to go and say, I know Dickinson will say, and I think he has said, I'm comfortable with either quarterback going out there. If Bo is healthy, Bo will be the guy. I don't think he has any problem putting Jake Mayer out there, but he's going to have, a lot to deal with his star quarterback here, trying to push to get himself back out there again. So I think that at this point in the season, it's early. I think the leash is still long, but as the season goes along, I think it's going to get shorter and shorter if injury-wise or otherwise, Bo can't get production out there on the field.
No, I agree as well. I'm trying to separate my personal feelings more to what's going to actually happen. Because if I was playing CFL Madden right now, Bo would not be my starter simply because I want a guy with a little bit more of a mobility, and it looked like it was his ankle, right? And you're right, it's a long season, but do you want Bo to be healthy for week 2 against the Ticats, or do you want Bo to be healthy first week of playoffs against Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, BC, probably not Edmonton? So, that's the balance, right? But of course, you could also win those games late in the year with Mayer as well. So I would personally not even start him, and I would really watch on fantasy if you're going to debate to put the gunslinger in as your quarterback, because he might get a half in. But hey, I was gonna ask Adam about this. There's a guy on the Ticats we know that likes to play to the whistle, so maybe he goes for that. And you never know, things like that could happen, right? And maybe Bo put his boot on the wrong foot at practice, right? So that's a little misdirection. You never know. But yeah, I'd watch Bo. I'd watch him. His arm looked fine last week, but now that was. Does anyone remember which foot it was? Was it his? Because I feel like that messes up your throw.
It's his planning foot.
It's his planning foot, right? So yeah, that definitely is something to watch out for.
So I'm going to ask the chat and also ask you guys in one. This is a real quick one. This is a yes or no question. Is there a quarterback controversy in Calgary 2 weeks into the season? Ryan, you go first.
No, I don't think there is. Not at this point. I think there could be down the stretch, but at this point, it's Bo's team. Like I said, I think it is until it starts getting into desperation mode.
Trey?
It should be, but no. I think, I agree with Ryan. It's going to be Bo's team until Bo says he can't play anymore, and I think that'll be the undoing of the Calgary Stampeders. So,
yeah, I kind of agree with both of you. I think that it's Bo it's Bo or bust. I think right now, still for the Calgary Stampeders, and even though I think Jake Mahar is more than capable of taking over the reins, I think it's still Bo's team. However, you know what? You give me a bad outing for Bo Levi Mitchell once or twice in a row, and we might be having to revisit this. Chat, though, if you get a chance, say yes or no if you think there's a quarterback controversy over in Calgary.
Yeah, right, and of course, and if you're listening to the podcast version afterwards, let us know on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod. Weigh in on this topic and many others.
Absolutely. While we're on Hamilton, do we want to touch quickly on just Simone Lawrence getting a fine? Is this the time to do it?
I agree. Yeah, to me, like with Simone Lawrence, I mean, I expected the fine. I was hoping for the suspension. He got exactly what I thought he was going to get. He was going to get a league fine. He was just going to get kind of a thing saying, hey, don't do that anymore. Simone Lawrence is kind of laughing about it earlier on Twitter, telling Dave Naylor, well, I haven't heard that I got a fine yet, but he probably got a fine. He doesn't realize it because he hasn't looked at his game check yet. Nevertheless, like I said, I thought maybe the CFL would finally put the foot down and send a message, but you know what? It's week one. I understand that, let's face it, if they were going out or doing something else, but you know what? It's what it is. Ryan?
Yeah, I expected the fine. I wasn't expecting the suspension here either. I think we talked about that on our recap show a couple of days ago as well, that, you know, we want these hits to stop, but it seems like the type of thing that we're typically not going to see a suspension. If he does it again in a couple of weeks, then maybe we're talking at that point. But should it have gotten a suspension? I think so, probably. Am I surprised it didn't? No, not at all.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. That's what we said last week. And it just got me thinking, do you think it would have been a difference if it was like Bo Levi or a different guy? Or do you think, because I mean, you know, Fajardo's the top quarterback in Saskatchewan, but he doesn't have that, doesn't have that league recognition like other guys do. And we see that a lot in the NFL, right? Where you hit Tom Brady like that, you're probably missing half the season, or Patrick Mahomes. But if you're hitting the third string backup on, you know, Baltimore or on Jaguars, you're probably not going to miss any time, right? So that was my only thing, because like Fajardo, I think, gets a little bit of not as much love across the league as he should, right? So, but anyway, yeah,
the way I look at that though is, I mean, I hope the league isn't doing it via the star. I mean, let's face it, Simone Lawrence in that case probably is a bigger star. He all of a sudden say, oh well, we're not suspending Simone Lawrence even though he pretty much took somebody's head off. So to me, yeah, no, I hope the CFL isn't doing that, and I still think that if it was Bo, or if it was Cody, or if it was Zach, either way, I don't think it would have mattered. But one thing I do want to bring up, every time that Simone Lawrence nails a quarterback in the first game of the season, they end up winning the Grey Cup. So, you know, there's that part. I just thought I'd throw that out there, Trey. So,
you just hanging on to anything, any hopes you can there for the season, Adam, or?
You know what? I got to get myself excited over something, right? So,
Adam's
nevertheless, we're moving on to the last game of the week. The Saskatchewan Roughriders are going to go and travel out to Brickfield in Edmonton to take on the Edmonton Elks. And I think one of the biggest storylines in this game is Chris Jones. I think that he really wants to probably go and show the Saskatchewan Roughriders that, hey, I'm still a really good coach in this league. If you're Chris Jones, which way do you tell your players and how they can win this game against the Rough Riders? And this is going to be a tough one probably, because we've all said quite a bit of bad stuff about the Elks this last week and how kind of gruesome they were. How can the Elks win this game this week? Name one thing that they can do to win this game against the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. Trey, you can go first.
Name the one thing they can do to stop the Saskatchewan Roughriders from winning is stop letting them get in the end zone. Like, don't let their quarterback run into the end zone 3 or 4 times, and don't let them throw it in 3 or 4 times. No, the defense has to be better. And I don't know, we're talking about quarterback controversies. Nick Arbuckle does not have a leash, I don't think, is not even anywhere close to Bo Levi. He's probably got one of the shortest in the league. So yeah, he's got to do better, but that defense has to do better. And that's, you know, and we'll talk about later, but looking at betting, I don't know how to look at this one, because you want to think that Edmonton won't get blown out twice in a row, but at the same time, you don't know, right? So yeah, their defense definitely has to be better. I think if they kept it to 20, 30 points, then you can make the argument that their offense should be able to score 20, 30 points. Not many games are we going to see 60, 59, right? So yeah, Ryan, what about you?
The big thing to me is discipline. Like, they took 120 something yards of penalties last game against BC. And yeah, the Lions put up some solid offense and some solid defense and some solid special teams all the way around and earned that victory themselves. But I think a lot of those drives of either the Elks drives were stalled due to penalties, or the Lions drives continued due to them and gave them some nice position there. So, you know, Chris Jones is a no-nonsense kind of coach. You know he's not happy with this win. he's got to be preaching discipline there in the locker room. And I think if we see another big Elks loss here and we see another 100-something yards worth of penalties, it's going to add up, and guys are going to start seeing the bench or seeing their walking papers from Chris Jones. So I think, if anything, that's what he's preaching this week is discipline in terms of penalties, in terms of making sure you follow your assignments and things like that on the defense. There's a lot here that the Elks are going to need to improve quickly in order to win this game from what we saw last week. But it's the CFL. Anything can happen. And do I necessarily think that they're going to bounce back big this week? No. But again, we've seen crazier in the CFL. So Chris Jones better be getting them ready to go, especially for a home crowd here, right? Because all that momentum of the offseason, they go and crap the bed over in week 1 in BC. Now you got your first home game. People have trusted what you've done this offseason and decided to come back to the stands. Do not disappoint them in your first game back at home, Edmonton.
No, I agree. The thing I'm looking for is, if they want to win this game against Saskatchewan, it's going to be take pressure off of the quarterback. And now I know what I said quarterback, because it could be Trey Ford, it could be Nick Arbuckle, whoever it is. They gave him way too much pressure last week to deal with. James Wilder didn't have a great game at all for running it, so they were just pretty much pinning their ears back and going for it, BC. So I think with a team like Saskatchewan, especially because their defensive line looked absolutely just crazy last week, you've got to get the pressure off of your quarterback as quick as you can. And you've got some good pieces to do that with Kenny Lawler, with Manny Arsenal. Like there's some good pieces. Darrell Walker. There's some pieces that you can use to get that pressure off of the quarterback quickly. Make some quick little slants or little quick crossers, and try to do what you can to keep that pressure off of your quarterback, because Saskatchewan is going to start sending a house if they sense anything going on there. Speaking of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, their offense was kind of okay last week. Cody Fajardo looked like he had a great outing, 311 yards, but a lot of that was in the last little bit in the fourth quarter. The receiving core really didn't get going until probably end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, with Shaq Evans. And now they're talking about a possible injury in Saskatchewan with Duke Williams. So that could be big news for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, because they were using Duke Williams as the ultimate decoy last week. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you guys about the Saskatchewan Roughriders offense heading into week number 2, right?
Obviously a little bit concerned with the lack of production last week, given how dominant their defense was and put them in the position to succeed and to, have 15 points on the board going into the final 6-7 minutes. I think despite that is definitely not what you want to see from an offense that I think is one of the deepest teams at wide receiver and has one of the best quarterbacks in the game in Cody Fajardo. Duke Williams is out due to injury. Kyron Moore is already out due to injury. Maybe they're looking a little thinner there at wide receiver, but to me, that just tells me that Shaq Evans targets are going to go through the roof. I think I was reading earlier today, it was one of only a few wide receivers with more than 10 targets on the week last week. And, maybe a lot more go his way here again. I do still like some of the pieces they have, but as you mentioned, whether he's making the big catches or he's the decoy guy, Duke Williams does a lot for that offense. So maybe we need to see it in his absence, a little more leaning on the run game here against the Elks, like BC did with James Butler last week. Not a lot for Jamal Morrow in the run game last week. I want to see more of that from him, but it's Jason Maz's offense. I'm not expecting it. Trey?
Yeah, I'm not too concerned. Again, you got to kind of look at the opponent. If they're playing Winnipeg or Toronto, a little bit more tougher defense, I'd be a little bit more worried. But I'm leaning towards Edmonton's going to take a few weeks before they really get it going. I don't know if they're going to win by. I don't know if they're going to get 59 points, but I think they'll have their chance. This will be the game that I think Fajardo and the team need to get their offense going. It's a I don't want to call it a tune-up game, but I think this is the game that they really need to come out firing. And I want Steve Fajardo make those deep throws and pick apart this defense.
The one thing I want to watch on the Saskatchewan side of the ball is, again, the run game. Last week, it was not very strong at all. Neither was Frankie Hickson. Jamal Morrow had some catches out of the backfield and was okay. But again, not very much in the run game. So I'm watching that offensive line to see if they can open up some holes for the run game, and also watching the running backs themselves and seeing what they can do. We seen last week that Edmonton kind of was a little weaker on the defensive line and letting some runs get through. Of course, James Butler had a huge game last week. So it'll be interesting to see what the Saskatchewan Roughriders could do this week to strategize. And I'm sure Jason Moss, as much as he is a throwing offensive coordinator, I'm sure he's probably going to try to run that run game a little bit more. You guys already touched on the discipline part of things. Usually it's Saskatchewan, actually. That's usually the most undisciplined team. Oddly enough, Jason Moss must have put his bat away and has not taken out his aggression on the Gatorade bottle yet. So that's always a good thing. Any other game notes that you guys have here for Edmonton or Saskatchewan? Right?
No, nothing really. I'm hoping it's a closer game for Edmonton. Like I said before, there are a lot of diehard Elks fans and new Elks fans that are likely going to be there in the stadium. So whether they win this one or not, I just want to see it a close, competitive game for the home opener for a team that did not win at home at all last year. So not rooting against your Riders here necessarily, but rooting for a good game here for the Elks.
No, again, I think it'll be closer, but I think the question that maybe we start looking at is, would Chris Jones be the first coach? I know he's a GM too, but is he going to be the first one on the hot seat if he goes, 0-2 and Saskatchewan wins by 40, 50? That does not look good. And like you said, they're trying to build something there in Edmonton. I don't think he'd be gone yet, but, it'd definitely be a good conversation him and the owner would be having.
Yeah, I don't see Chris Jones going absolutely anywhere, because I'm sure they must have backed a Brinks truck up to get him, essentially. And let's face it, 2 games into the season, if he has a terrible game here. However, I just, even as a Riders fan, I don't like watching blowouts. If it's on Saskatchewan side 4 or against Saskatchewan, blowouts are never fun for any team. Even watching on TSN, it's boring after a while. Because you're just like, okay, we're getting on to the next game. Let's get on to it. Because it just ruins any flow of the game. It's just ends up getting chippy and ends up getting with injuries and all sorts of stuff. Let's hope that just for the Edmonton fans as well, and for the Rider fans, that this is a close game and that it goes right down to the wire and everybody has a fun time and goes home afterwards. So, that's week 2, guys. Anything else that you want to talk about for any storyline on week 2? I guess, Trey?
I don't know where Ryan went there. Yeah, no, I'm good. I think, I hope it's as good as week 1. We had 2 really close games. And then, poor Ryan's internet just crashed. So hopefully everything is fine. Yeah, we'll finish it up here. We'll keep going. Week 1 was hell of a week. You had the 2 game winners in Calgary and Winnipeg. And then you had Saskatchewan, which, again, the scoreboard made it look like it was a little bit farther apart than what it was. And then just the blowout in BC. So that's all I really hope for, is you keep having games like that. If it's going to be a blowout, I hope it's the BC kind of blowout where, you see some guys like Rourke and, their running back. I'm forgetting their name right now, but had days. Butler, yeah. So that's what I really hope for. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and, actually, I was just kind of catching up on one other thing with Edmonton that's kind of a really cool idea. Did you see, there's actually 2 things. One, the guaranteed weather price for the game. That's kind of cool. So I think you can buy your tickets for like $22 to go to an Edmonton Elks game. So that's kind of cool. The other thing also is, if you're a season ticket holder, you get drawn out on get a draw made. And if you're the right number and the right person, you get to flip the coin at the beginning of the game. That's awesome. Simple thing to do, but boy, I wish Saskatchewan would do that. That'd be awesome to go and flip the coin. What do you guys think?
I think it's cool. I think all of these things, I saw that weather pricing thing, and I was like, That is a very unique idea, and I would have laughed if it was like 1 degree outside, and that's how much the tickets were. But hey, anything you can do to get people in the stands, very happy about that. So,
Trey?
Oh no, yeah, I agree. That was super cool, and I would love to go flip the coin. I just want to do. I've been going to season tickets for a while, and they always have those contests, and my section never gets picked. So to do anything like that, I think would be super cool.
Yeah, I know. I won potato chips once in our section, and I mean that was the greatest day ever. But that was about as much as we got there in Saskatchewan. So, anyways, I think we're moving on now to. So what are we moving on to now, Ryan?
We're moving on to the CFL Fantasy content. Let me just get it up here on the screen. I apologize, my internet connection dropped out there, so I'm not sure if I was making a funny face while you guys continue talking for a bit, or if you started trash talking me or what. But I'm here back. I'm ready to talk some CFL Fantasy with you guys. Quick refresher. I talked about it a little bit last week. You'll see some stuff if you're watching our video feed over on YouTube or any of the other platforms. You'll see some charts here on the screen, and they're all based on my CFL Fantasy Valuable Production Model. What it boils down to, if you want to get a 100-point week in CFL Fantasy, you want to have 2.5 points per every $1,000 you spend. So that's kind of what you're looking for as you're looking through players. So let's start off and take a look at the quarterback options for the week and see who we like there. Most expensive is Vernon Adams Jr. at $12,557, all the way down to Dane Evans, the least expensive at $7,256. I find this one to be a tough week based on a lot of the matchups and the injuries. Like Zach Alleros didn't look fantastic last week. Bit banged up. Bo Levi Mitchell, same thing here. Vernon Adams Jr. against the Toronto defense we haven't seen yet. Mcleod Bethel Thompson with an offense we haven't seen yet. A home series between Winnipeg, Ottawa. What do you make of that? Nick Arbuckle, not even going to go there. After last week's performance and against the Riders' defense this week, yes, he's cheap. I don't like the play there. To me, it comes down to two options at the opposite ends of the spectrum. It's either you go Cody Fajardo of the Saskatchewan Roughriders at $12,090. If you want to hit your full value from him, you're looking at getting over 30 points, though, which is tough for a quarterback to hit. Nathan Rourke hit it last week. Fajardo hit about 26. Against this Edmonton defense, I think he certainly can. He runs with the ball a lot. He can pick up a rushing touchdown here and there. I like Fajardo if you have the room for a high-priced quarterback. I think he can hit mid-20s on points. I also like Dane Evans as a real underrated value play. Like, he's a good quarterback. He's the cheapest one here. He's just $7,000. You want to get 18 points out of him. I know he only had 9 last week, but I'm expecting a big bounce back from him this week, maybe motivated by the birth of his new daughter, like we talked about before. So I like those two options. Fajardo, if you're going high-end price, or Dane Evans for the value play. What do you guys like at quarterback, Trey?
No, I like Dane Evans. I went with him last week. I don't know. It's kind of jumping between him and Bethel Thompson right now, kind of more. I love what you got going on here with this value play, but this fantasy, I'm just trying to get back to like 1-1, man, in most of my leagues, right? So I'm probably gonna go with Bethel Thompson just because I want to see what he does with having that first week bye, and I think his offense will be firing good, and I think he's gonna have a lot of dump offs to Andrew Harris, right? So that'll pick up points. Adam, what about you?
Well, I was going to go with Mcleod Bethel Thompson this week, and I'm still thinking I might. It depends what I do here. I'm debating either going really expensive and going Cody Fajardo just because look at that quarterback average versus the Edmonton Elks is 49.2. I mean, that's got to be tempting. I don't care. That's pretty cool. But $12,000 for Cody Fajardo, that's over a quarter of your money right there and then, and you're relying on one player to get you a lot of points. Did it last week. I don't know if I really am comfortable about it this week. We'll see. But, Mcleod Bethel Thompson, I want to see what he does with all these extra pieces around him this year. And I want to see if that maybe helps him out quite a bit. And if it does, he's not a bad option for what he's going for. And like you said before, Ryan, Dane Evans, I just worry about him against Calgary is the only thing. Although he's had a pretty good average against them, I guess, in the past.
Yeah, it's a tough week. I like Mcleod, Bethel, Thompson potentially as well. I'm not sure I'm going there week one myself, but he is, I think, more appealing than some of the other options. Like Zach Alleros is a bit cheaper, but I'm not sure I'm going there based on what we saw last week in the rematch against the same team once again here, who shut him down decently well the week before. Let's take a look at the options at running back. We have Andrew Harris making his first appearance in the double blue for the Argos, and he tops the price point at almost $11,000, which I think is absurd of a CFL fantasy price for a guy playing his first game with a new team. I know he's got the credibility from, his results of the past, but you've got Kadeem Carey starting for Calgary. Hamilton, not really sure yet. Don Jackson was a little bit injured. Sean Thomas Arlington could get the start here. James Wilder is starting in Edmonton. Jamal Morrow, the featured back in Saskatchewan. Winnipeg, I expect more of a time split between Oliveira and Augustine again. Neither really got anything going against Ottawa last week. And then you've got Jeshron Antwi at $4,500, should be the starter and will be the starter for Montreal Thursday night. Had a good game last week. Devonta Williams, $2,500, a cheap starter for the Red Blacks because William Powell is still out. This was a hard position for me to pick. I don't like Harris at that high price. I want to see his workload, how he gets used in this new offense for him, and not having Winnipeg's offensive line. Kadeem Carey, the other high-priced one. I liked what he did last week. He put up a good total. I don't know if he puts up 2 touchdowns every game, though. The Riders didn't get a whole lot running going against Hamilton. Hamilton's running backs I'm staying away from. Winnipeg's I'm staying away from right now. Edmonton against that Riders defensive line. I don't like James Wilder Jr. this week. The main 3 options I'm considering. Jamal Morrow at $53.13 is his price. You're looking for a bit over 13 points from him. He gets involved in the run game. He got involved in the pass game last week, and he returned some kicks, so he gets you some value there. He's a cheap running back going against an Elks team that could be punting quite a bit. So I like Jamal Morrow there as a play this week. I also like Jeshron Antwi. $4,500 for a starter who's getting all the carries and rattled one off for 70 yards last game. I like that play there as well. If you need to go really cheap, you can go Devonta Williams. Didn't work out amazingly last week. He only put up 4.4, but you don't need a whole lot from him. So those are kind of the 3 guys I'm looking at, but probably leaning towards Morrow and Antwi. What about you guys? Let's start with you this time, Adam.
I think you pretty much went and copied what I was actually having on my CFL fantasy sheet already. Jamal Morrow again, average versus opponents, 44.1. Obviously, he loves the Edmonton Elks. I mean, to me, that's going to be and especially when you've seen the results last week against James Butler and the Edmonton Elks.
I should clarify here. The average versus opponent column is other teams this season against Edmonton. So that 44.1 is because of James Butler in the last week. That's not Jamal Morrow's career average against Edmonton.
Well, that changes up a little bit here for me.
That changes things a little bit. It's a small sample size, but yes. The Elks have given up on average 44 points fantasy-wise to running backs this season in the one game they've played.
Oh, okay. Nah, you know what? It still doesn't change my mind much. Let's face it. Edmonton didn't look the greatest against the run game the other day there against James Butler. I'm going to probably either throw Jamal Morrow or I might even throw Frankie Hickson in there just as a kind of a cheap option if I really need to. I think even he might get some game going here this week. I was thinking about Devonta Williams from Ottawa, but then it dawned on me that Jackson Jeffcoat's back, so there ain't going to be no running on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers probably much this week. So, yeah, that's probably one I would probably stay away from. Antwi's another good pick, though. I think that Toronto's maybe a little bit weaker than they used to be in the D-line, and might be able to take a little bit of an advantage of that, and he's going to take a lot of carries. Trey, what about you?
Well, great minds all think alike, and all geniuses are not appreciated in their time. I have Jeshron Antwi and Jamal Morrow already in my lineup. You know, they're the power. I think they're the plays. You know, not a lot of money. I could see Antwi getting a lot of yards against Toronto and got a lot of the action. And same with Morrow. I know the Saskatchewan's not a run-first team, but against Edmonton, they might be, you know what I mean? They might have to run down the clock in the third and fourth quarter if they're up 20, right? And I don't think you're going to throw the ball to do that, but maybe Jason Moss does. So that's exactly what I have in my lineup. Yeah, I think Andrew Harris, that's way overpriced. I see where they're coming from. You know, the leader basically of yards over the last 3-4 seasons, especially combined. Yeah, I would never spend that much. And again, like James Wilder, I don't think really did much last week. Kadeem Carey, you never know what's going to go on in Hamilton. So yeah, I think lower end in the running back is definitely the play, and save that money for either your quarterback or your wideouts.
Yeah, you can get Jamal Morrow and Joshua Nantwi for cheaper than you can get Andrew Harris, right? You can get a 2-for-1 deal there, and I think we're all on the same page. So is Simon in the chat. He says, you guys are reading my screen. We're not. We're just all on, I think, what will be the right page this week. Of course, we have to wait for the action out on the field to determine whether that's the case. Let's take a look at the wide receivers, and let's break it down because there's so many, team by team or game by game. First up, we've got Montreal and Toronto. The most interesting thing here for me is, Eugene Lewis was the leading receiver for Montreal last week. Jake Winnipeg, I put him in my lineup last week. He had a down game. His price has dropped a bit as a result, and that $7,500 is actually pretty, makes me salivate a little bit for a bounce back week for Jake Winnipeg here. I'm tempted to put him in my lineup, 18.9 points. He gets a solid number of catches, puts a touchdown in there like he's known to do. I think he easily could hit that for you. Guy I think is a little bit overpriced is probably Chandler Worthy. He's not set to line up at receiver. He is just going to be handling return duties with Mario Alford out. $5,600 if you're Devontae Dedmon last season. I'm putting that in my lineup. Not sure I'm spending that on returns only for Montreal. And I'll get your guys' takes here in a second, but looking at the Toronto side of the matchup, you've got a couple of guys out due to injury this week. Eric Rogers, not in the lineup this week for Toronto. Adam, don't put him in your fantasy lineup this time like you did last week. Juwan Breskison, also out this week for Toronto. So you've got Brandon Banks as the most expensive receiver, and this may be the cheapest price we've ever seen Brandon Banks in CFL Fantasy at almost $7,000. It's a very tempting pick, not going to lie. Not sure I'm going there yet, though, because I want to see a game from him. You've got Tavares Daniels, Curly Gittins Jr., Marky Thambos, Cameron Phillips getting a start there as well. Of all of the Toronto options, I love Curly Gittins Jr. He's the go-to option for Mcleod. Bethel Thompson was down the stretch last season. But these are a lot of similarly priced, similarly talented guys. And I think it might be hard to go in the direction of one of these in their first game of the year. Trey, what do you think on Montreal and Toronto? Who stands out to you?
No, again, great minds think alike. You're talking about Jake Winnipeg, and he's sitting in my roster right now. I think the money value is there. He did have a down game, but do you think he's going to have 2 down games in a row? Guess we'll find out. And I was really impressed with that Montreal offense last week. I think Burton Adams Jr. doing it with his arm and his legs. So I think he'll definitely get the ball around to all his options. Adam, and then Toronto, I'm staying away from Toronto. I don't know what Brandon Banks is going to do. They had the week off, a lot of injuries, so I'm not too sure what I'm going to do. Brandon Banks, if that 7,000 stays around, then I'm over the next few weeks. I'm definitely sure he might come in and out of my lineup on fantasy, but right now I want to see a game. Adam?
Yeah, no, I think that's the one. If there is any in these two teams, I don't know why, but I just have a funny feeling this is going to be a real defensive slugfest, except for the run game. For me, for wide receivers, Brandon Banks for $7,000, you almost look at that and think, well, the guy used to be like 12 to 14,000. That's a deal. But yet you don't know what he's got for chemistry with Mcleod Bethel Thompson yet. So like you guys have been saying here, until you know maybe more what Brandon Banks can do. If I had a gun to my head and I had to pick somebody, it might be Tavares Daniels, I think, from the Toronto Argonauts, $6,634, and has some decent yardage and decent plays usually in him. Had a good year, reasonable good year last year. So I would probably go with Tavares Daniels with her for anybody. I just don't have much faith yet in the Montreal receiving core. I know Jake Winnipeg is probably the right pick there, if anybody. I think Eugene Lewis is going to have a good game as well. But again, your dollar amounts, I think any of these I'm going to stay away from this week, unless I pick Eric Rogers and put him back into my lineup for weekly.
The only other guy maybe on Montreal for me, Reggie White Jr. I think he hit his full value last week. You only need 8.9 points out of him. He's kind of the number 3 receiver there in Montreal. Could get some plays there if you're looking for a cheap Montreal receiver. Second game, we've got the rematch between Winnipeg and Ottawa. And this is one where I don't know what direction to go because Greg Ellingson was the go-to guy last week, put up 19.4 points. He's almost $9,000. Seems like he could be Winnipeg's number 1 receiver this season. But it was a down game for Rasheed Bailey and Nick Dempsky, and you have to think they're not going to have too many of those in a row, and there's going to be a bit of a bounce back, and some of those catches are probably going to be taken away from Greg Ellingson as a result. Drew Wolodarski was held scoreless last week. Dalton Schoen had a pretty good game, 12.2 points, basically doubled the value you need. He's still $2,500. He didn't rise at all. Honestly, he's the bomber I'm most looking to put in my lineup here potentially. Like, if you can get a guy that's a starting receiver, was featured heavily in the offense, and he could be again this week, like you put a $2,500 receiver in your fantasy lineup and it doesn't work out, you're missing out on top 6 points to try to hit that 100-point mark. You can make that up easily at another position. So I think it's high risk or low risk, high reward for Dalton Schoen on the Bombers side of things. On the Ottawa side of things, Jalen Acklin was the top receiver last week, put up 20.3 points at his price, just under $7,000. You need 17.5 from him. There's a lot of interesting options here for Ottawa. I like Jalen Acklin the most because he's most familiar with Jeremiah Masoli. They've got the chemistry. They missed on the one deep ball last week. I'm sure they practiced that this week, and they're going to try to hit it again this time. So I like Jalen Acklin. Darvin Adams had 7 catches for 70 yards last week. Should be a go-to receiver there. I think his price is decent for his role that I think he'll play in this offense here as well. And Shaq Johnson actually didn't have too bad of a game, put up 14.3 last week. So I'm kind of tempted, to put one of these guys, Jalen Acklin, Darvin Adams, into my lineup. I've been flip-flopping which one I think will have the better week, but I kind of like these plays against beat-up Winnipeg secondary. What do you guys think? Adam, let's go to you first.
Yeah, I really like Shaq Johnson on Ottawa for $4,300. It's not a big pile of money, and I mean, you're getting very good output for that. You look at a guy just above him, Darvin Adams. He's an extra $1,200, $1,300, and you're getting the same kind of performance on the average right now from him. I would probably, if I'm looking for a fairly reasonable back, I probably would go Shaq Johnson. Over on the Winnipeg side, though, I just do not see Nick Dempsky having 2 games like that. And again, a little bit higher of price to compared to maybe like Dalton Schoen. Dalton Schoen, I mean, that's a steal. I might even try to figure out how we get that one in there. But, and that might be my play as if I go for Cody Fajardo later on, that might be where I have to go with for my wide receiver. But, I think Nick Dempsky's going to have a game on tomorrow or on Friday night, I guess, and should really ball out. I think he's probably worth the 6,000. Trey, what about you?
Yeah, sticking with Winnipeg, I agree. Dalton Schoen, he's been my flex guy last week. He's going to be my flex guy this week, and he keeps playing this way. He's going to be a fan favorite in Winnipeg pretty quick. A guy who he doesn't even have his picture up on the website yet, and he's making picking up some big plays for the Bombers. Yeah, me too. I was jumping between Nick Dempsky and Darvin Adams. Those are kind of the 2 guys I was trying to fill out in my other receiver spot. I agree with both of you. I can't see Nick Dempsky having a bad game 2 weeks in a row. Maybe you watch this Ottawa defense focus more on Ellingson and Dalton Schoen, so maybe it opens up some space for Dempsky. You never know. So I'm really interested to see that. So yeah, right now I got Dempsky and Dalton Schoen from the Bombers in my receiver core.
I'm expecting a bounce-back game from Dempsky. My only concern there of stacking the 2 Winnipeg receivers is Zach Alleros doesn't throw for high yardage, right? So unless you're getting touchdowns from these guys, they're going to spread the ball around a little bit. And I may not stack that there necessarily, but hoping to see a bounce-back game from these guys. Let's move on to Calgary and Hamilton. Reggie Begelton, one of the biggest disappointments of the week last week, put up just 4.3 points. Kamar Jordan, an underwhelming week as well. The two guys that led the way for Calgary were come in at a middle price. Richie Sindani, just under $4,700, put up 17.1 last week. Malik Henry also had a touchdown in a good game, 15.5 for him, and he comes in at $4,500. Those are kind of two guys I'm looking at also as a decent middle-priced option. I think Henry did leave practice with an injury today, so you have to check the depth charts there. I'm still staying away from Bagleton and Kamar Jordan at the prices they're at right now with the unknowns of Bo Levi Mitchell. Also, I think the Ticats defense shut things down decently well against the Riders for much of the game. A lot of the cheaper options here, it's hard to see, how much they're going to get in Calgary's offense. I don't think any of the $2,500 plays is going to jump off the sheet necessarily consistently for you, but might do enough to get you a couple of points. But I like Sindani. I like Henry on Calgary's side. On Hamilton's side, I still think Braylon Addison is way expensive at over $10,000. Last week, he had a good week, put up 16 points, but that was still 10 short of what you need for his price, basically, to hit your value. Tim White, disappointing week last week. I put him in my lineup. It didn't work out. 3.8 points for him at $6,000 salary. He needs to have a bounce back game. I'm not willing to go back to the well on Tim White again this week. I need to see the bounce back for him. Stephen Dunbar Jr., maybe the option I like most here in the Ticats receiving. He had a long play to him, I think, last game. A big touchdown there. I think he had another touchdown that got called back due to penalty. Could be the red zone guy here for the Ticats at just under $6,000 in CFL Fantasy. Trey, what do you think on Hamilton and Calgary?
Yeah, these are two teams I generally stayed away from. I just lost my team here. Only because, again, with the value, I think Braylon Addison, that's a lot of money to put up there. Like you said, Tim White didn't exactly have the week last week. So Hamilton was one team I stayed away from. And, you're not sure about Dane Evans. He was kind of all over the place last week. So see that. And then with Calgary, I don't know about Bo. So I kind of want to stay away from Calgary's receiving core. Again, really high-priced guys in Bagleton and Jordan. And, they have to make a lot of points to get your value. And so I don't know. This was one game I kind of stayed away from this weekend. Adam?
Actually, I stayed away from both of these teams, too. If I was going to have to pick some guys, though, Sean Bain from Calgary, it's $2,510. You can't call him right at the league minimum. But had a little bit of yardage, 6.2 yards average, which isn't bad. So if you want to take the chance and you think Bo Levi is healthy, Colton Gunchak is injured this week. I think he's going to be out. So Bain might not be a little bad of an option for $2,510. Over on the Hamilton side of the ball, I am looking at David Unger. Like I said, $2,500. Again, cheap receiver. And let's face it, yeah, they had a bad week last week, the receiving core for Hamilton. I think they're going to have a little bit of a bounce back week. I just don't know which guy again. But they have some cheap options. Poppy White, $2,920, 10.4 yards average. That's not bad. Probably result for what you're going to get out of that. Same thing with Jake Burt. I think one of those three guys is probably going to be the pick this week, but I just don't know which one, so I'm going to stay away from Hamilton. And if you haven't noticed, I've stayed away from Hamilton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto. There's probably a reason behind that. Let's see what we got for the next one.
Yeah, well, I think that takes us right into our next game here. We've got the Edmonton Elks and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Let's take a look at the Edmonton side of things here. I think you might be hard-pressed to take an Elks receiver based on their offensive output last year and the defense they're facing. Kenny Waller is the most expensive at $8,606. Put up 12.2 points in his Elks debut last week. You need 21.5 to hit your 100-point value threshold there. I don't like that price. Darrell Walker, I did see some promising things last week. Fell just short of his price. If the Elks offense gets going, I like to think Darrell Walker is going to be a big part of that this week if it all of a sudden does. I'm not willing to chance it, though, right now, most likely. The only one maybe I'd put in here is Jalen Marshall. I think he was returning kicks last week for Edmonton, so he got some return yardage, also got involved in the offense a little. Another cheap play at $2,600. If you want to take a chance on Edmonton here, maybe go for the cheap play in Jalen Marshall. I don't like Manny Arsenault, Mike Jones, or Shai Ross at this point for the Elks. On the Riders side of things, well, a lot will depend on the health of Duke Williams, I think, of how this week goes. He's at $9,553. Not a great week for him price-wise last week. Like Adam said earlier, he was drawing a lot of extra coverage, and I think being the decoy guy, I'm looking for a bounce back, especially against that Elks secondary. If Duke Williams is in the lineup and I have money to spend at wide receiver, he's probably the high-priced, 9,000-plus priced receiver I'm most likely to put in my lineup this week. But injury does concern me a little bit, and I do like the number of targets Shaq Evans got last week at $6,100. He got a lot of targets his way. I don't know if he got a touchdown. I don't believe he did last week. I could be wrong on that one. Adam's shaking his head no. So, add that in there. I think he can hit his value. You guys convinced me. You talked him up big time last week. Keon Schaefer-Baker also still a value play at $4,500. The other options, Picton, McInnes, Prawl, $2,500. Not necessarily favoring one of those over the other. I like Shaq Evans. I like Keon Schaefer-Baker as mid to high priced receivers. Adam, let's start with you on the Riders and the Elks here. Who do you like?
Well, I think I'm going to probably end up taking probably a few Edmonton Elks. No, I'm kidding. I'm not. I'm going to take Shaq Evans again like I did last week. Got me some good yardage, and I think he's just ready to go off. And especially if Duke Williams isn't there, he's going to have to be the guy to catch some footballs. And let's face it, I think with Cody Fajardo wanting to prove that he's got something in Edmonton, that could be a very good pickup there. Shaq Evans, Keon Schaefer-Baker, again, Canadian that just absolutely can seem to do it all. Last week, he was trying to learn how to fly for over top of one of the Hamilton players. And I'll take him. The other one I'm looking at, this is where I'm going to be debating myself a little bit this week, is do I go with Dalton Schoen, like I just said a little bit earlier, go with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, or do I take a chance on Jacob Prawl? Last week, he had some pretty nice catches and could be an X factor, kind of a sleeper play. I don't mind Jacob Prawl also for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. In Edmonton, last week I did take Manny Arsenault, and I don't know why I took Manny Arsenault. I thought maybe he was just going to light up the BC Lions for something to do, but apparently I was wrong. So really, I can't see anybody really on the Edmonton Elks that I'd be really excited and jumping over. So, Trey, what about you?
No, I can't lie. I'm not going to take any of this for Edmonton receiving core as well. On the Saskatchewan side, I kind of forgot. I was watching the game, and then I kept seeing that hyphenated name, and I'm like, why does that name sound familiar? Because the guy Adam talks about on the show. And now he got me thinking maybe I'll put Schaefer-Baker in instead of some other guy in my receiving core. He picked up some good plays. Like I said, every play, I was watching the highlights, and the little bit I watched the game live, it was that long hyphenated name on the back of the jersey getting up after a big catch, right? So I might take him. Definitely. You said Shaq Evans too. If there's an injury to Duke Williams, would definitely be something to look at. So those are the two guys in green and white.
All right, let's take a look at the defenses quickly to round out the fantasy talk here. Winnipeg's the most expensive at $4,159. The Riders' defense is $3,785, and then everybody else on the board is at $3,200. I can tell you the play not to go this week is probably the Edmonton Elks, who put up -4 points last week. I hope to see them break even and at least get above 0 this week, but I'm not going to that well until we see some improvement there. The defense you strongly have to consider taking here is the Saskatchewan Roughriders at $3,785. It's only $500 cheaper than one of the cheapest ones, or more expensive. 22 points last week by the Riders defense against what I consider to still be a pretty decent Hamilton team, going up against an Edmonton team that looked terrible last week. Nick Arbuckle, I think, had 3 interceptions. I like the Riders defense as the top pick here as well. What do you guys think on the defenses this week? And If the Riders is the consensus one here, of the cheap $3,200 plays, which one of those stands out to you as a potential option this week? Let's go to you first, Trey.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm going to be between Winnipeg or Saskatchewan. But between the other ones, let's see here. I would take Ottawa. They kept Winnipeg to 17 points last week, and you'd think after another week of game film, they might be able to do that the same. I think this game is going to be a close one. I could see it definitely be, 19-20 kind of game like last week. And again, on my thing, I'm going to probably take Saskatchewan or Winnipeg. But yeah, I could see Ottawa if I'm not trying to be too much of a homer. Adam, what about you?
Well, I'm taking Saskatchewan. I mean, for the defense. Last week, I made a terrible, terrible mistake after Trey convinced me, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they got a great defense. You should take their defense. And I'm like, yep, I'm taking their defense. And then when I'm sitting at Mosaic Stadium, drinking a fountain pop for $5.50 or $6 and sitting there and saying, why did I listen to Trey? Anyways, so yeah, Saskatchewan's my pick. But out of the $3,200 ones, I'm going to probably take the Calgary Stampeders. I think that their defense is pretty good, and I mean, they're usually traditionally pretty strong up against the Ticats. Dane Evans, again, I really question his throwing abilities sometimes. Sometimes he's really great, and sometimes he's really off. If I had to pick a $3,200 option, it would be the Stampeders.
Yeah, and they had the best week out of all of them last week with 7 points on the board for the Stampeders there. I would agree with that take there. Well, that's all we've got for our fantasy options here this week. Of course, if you want to play CFL Fantasy alongside of us, we do have a public league, the Canadian Football Countdown. You can find that on the CFL Fantasy site. Join us alongside there. We are also, the three of us are all playing in the CFL Podcast Fantasy League. This week, I've got Brazilian Ty of the Two and Out CFL Podcast looking to exact some revenge on Adam's behalf after his loss last week. So I will try to get us back on top here, Adam, on your behalf. Who else do we got here? Adam, you've got Daltz from the Rouge Radio podcast. He went 1-0 last week, so trying to hand him his first loss. And Trey, you've got Rod from the Wood Cookie Sawcast. Both of you looking for your first win of the season. Sounds like you guys are going a good direction with your lineups here. I think we're on the same page for a lot of things, so we'll see if this week works out for all of us. Of course, check out all these other great CFL podcasts. Make sure you check out the ones in the Canadian Football Podcast Network at CF Pod Network on Twitter. In our little fantasy league here on the podcast, looks like the only roster change from last week is Mike has put William Stanback on his injured list. No surprise there. No waiver wire pickups, so everybody rolling with the same rosters in week 2. We'll see how the lineups shake out there. Of course, you can follow along with everything going on with CFL Fantasy. Follow us on Twitter at CF Countdown Pod for that. Now we get into, to round up the show, we get into our picks and we get into our bets here. And for that, we send you over to our resident betting expert. Trey, take it away.
I love that title. Just quick recap. Last week, all three of us went 3-1. So if anyone's playing along at home, you would have made some money if you agreed with some of us. We disagreed on a couple of games, but all ended up on the same record. This week, this is a tough week, guys. I still kind of, everything's written in pencil until we go through this, but we'll kick off the Thursday nighter. Montreal at Toronto. Toronto is favored by 3.5. I've been hemming and hawing about this one all day. Like, which are we going to get Ottawa, who only loses, or Montreal, sorry, who only loses by a couple points again? Are we going to get Toronto coming out and scoring big? I'm going to go Montreal to cover. I'm going to go on a limb here and say they might even outright win this one. Let's go with Ryan first.
Yeah, I kind of like that pick too. I feel like I'm probably, if I'm just going for straight up picks, I'm probably leaning Toronto here, but I don't know if I'm leaning that direction enough to pick them against the spread because I think Montreal can make it close. I think Montreal could also win this game. This one's a bit of a toss-up for me. How flat does Toronto come out after the week 1 bye? We haven't seen them play a regular game yet. A lot of interesting new pieces there. And Montreal's got to come out and perform to, put your money where your mouth is for their owner there. So, I'll take Montreal, I guess, against the spread here. But if I was going straight up, I'd take the Argos at home. How about you, Adam?
I'm sorry, Trey. What was that number once more?
3.5, -3.5 for Toronto.
Okay. I think that the Toronto Argonauts will cover that, and they will actually win outright on this one. The reason being is I think that the Argonauts have a lot to prove this year. I think that with Mcleod, Bethel, Thompson, he wants to show that he's earned that first overall starting position. He's never had it before, and he wants to show that he's done well. And same thing also with Brandon Banks. I think Brandon Banks has a point to prove in the East. And unfortunately, his victim might be the Montreal Alouettes. Alouettes again have an injury on their running back, and I don't care who is in the backfield for the Montreal Alouettes. It's not William Stanback. I think that he's probably the guy that I would say probably would be the biggest difference in this, and that's why I will go with the Argos outright to beat the Alouettes.
I like it, guys. This was a tough one. Like when I said, but it only gets harder. Next, we go to the rematch Friday night. Winnipeg going into Ottawa. They give Winnipeg's -2.5 favorite over Ottawa at home. I'm gonna go with Ottawa again. I think again they could. This is one I was actually debating going outright if for real betting, just because it's a little bit. You make a little bit more money if Ottawa wins, and it's really tough to go against the home team. I'm going to go Ottawa. Adam, what about you?
I'm going to actually go with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. As crazy as that sounds, I think the Bombers are going to come out and just absolutely, again, show that, hey, we're not that team that was there last week. We've got Jeffcoat back. We've got other pieces back that are going to be helping them a little bit. And I think that they're going to start establishing a run game here. Nick Dempsky's got a point to prove as well. He had a bad game, and he doesn't want to show off 2 times in a row. No matter if it's in Ottawa or in Winnipeg. I'm going to go with Winnipeg this week to cover.
This one was actually the second easiest probably for the week for me to pick, and I'm taking Ottawa against the spread. I'm taking Ottawa straight up in this game. It's a home-and-home series. I generally, over the history of this podcast, have picked a split because that's more common in those. And I think Ottawa played a solid game last week, and I think they're going to clean up some of those mistakes and capitalize on them here. I think it's a good team, and we're going to see why this week as they take down the defending champs in their home opener. So give me Ottawa straight up in this game.
No, I like it. The 2 Bomber fans are going against the home team here. You're never supposed to bet on your favorite team because when they win, you bet on them and they lose. You don't like them, and you bet on them to lose, and you start cheering for them to lose. But I think that one's going to be a tough one. But anyway, let's go to Saturday. Calgary in Hamilton. Hamilton favored only by 1, pretty close to just a pick 'em. I'm going to take the Ticats at home. My mind's blank. I like what they did against Saskatchewan up to a point. It was a pretty close game. Now you give them home field. Calgary, again, was a team that almost lost to Montreal. It's going to be a very close one. So I'm going to edge towards Hamilton. Let's go to Ryan this time.
This one was the hardest one, I think, for me this week because you've got a Hamilton team that I expect to be better, a Calgary team that I was very high on coming into the year. So I think this one's close either way. I mean, the line is a point here, so there's not much to give. You're basically got to pick this outright for the most part, right? So give me Hamilton, I guess, at home with the home field advantage. I feel like this is a split really either way. So some injury question marks for Bo Levi Mitchell. I think the Ticats are better than what they showed last week and are going to have a good bounce back game here.
The only thing that makes me question if I should pick Calgary or not is Bo Levi Mitchell. If he's healthy, I'm picking the Stamps. I don't see there being any reason why he couldn't win this game. Even him on a 80%, I think that he can make enough throws here. That and Hamilton really their defense impressed me a little bit, but their offense just stunk it up a little bit too much for me in Saskatchewan to kind of be confident in them. I think they're going to have a better game, but being as it's only a point, I'm going to go with the Stampeders.
All right, crazy. Me and Ryan sticking the same. Adam going the other way. So we're gonna have different standings for sure going next week. Last game. This is a biggie. This is another one I had some tough time with because it's kind of big. Saskatchewan going into Edmonton. Saskatchewan -8. Edmonton underdog +8 at home. No, I'm gonna go with the Rough Riders. I think this one. I didn't like the big line last week when Winnipeg and Ottawa, just because I didn't think that those teams were that far apart, and it turned out they weren't. But I do think these two teams are this far apart, unless Chris Jones can really have a quick turnaround this week with his defense. Adam, what about you? What do you think the green and white's going to do against the green and yellow?
Usually I don't want to bet against my team, but no, I'm not betting against my team. I think that the Rough Riders, let's face it, they had a pretty good they started to get the offense clicking in the fourth quarter against the Elks, or against the Ticats, sorry. And the Elks just looked helpless in BC. I didn't think BC was that great of a team. I thought more of Edmonton was just that bad. And I hate to be that guy because I know I just got a good Twitter follower that probably will be very upset with my pick. But with regardless, I'm gonna have to go with Saskatchewan, even with the 8.5.
Give me Edmonton straight up in this game. I'm kidding. That is not happening. I am also going with Saskatchewan, even against the 8-point difference here. Adam lost his mind there for a sec. I think the Elks are going to be better. I'm not sure it's by week 2 here. I think the Riders are the better team. I think the Riders are going to have a better week offensively as well. Can they put up 8 sacks, 4 or 5 turnovers again? I don't know. Probably not. You probably see a step back from the defense, but I think the offense is going to be much more efficient against the worst defense in Edmonton. So give me the Riders covering the spread.
All right, guys, just for fun, if you were to bet on every underdog outright to win $10, which would be, let's see here, Edmonton, Calgary, Ottawa, and Montreal, $390.55 on Play Now. So you never count out those underdogs. But with what we got here, if we did a $10 bet, Ryan and myself are at $135.84 if we win. Adam is at $130.08. Again, that's if you parlay all 4 together. But now single game betting, just bet on each of them individually. And like I said, if you stuck with us last week, 3-1 is all around. So you made money. That's all I got for week 2.
Right on. And of course, bet responsibly. Do not bet the house. Do not bet the farm on what we say here on the podcast, even though we did have a good week. And also with our fantasy advice as well. And make sure you check the depth charts before each of these games, before you make your picks and your bets as well, because that can change a whole lot there. I think that does it for our week 2 preview here. So let's start getting into wrapping up the show here. Let me pull it up on my screen. Let's take a look at what's coming up next here on the podcast. Monday night, it's our weekly recap. We'll take a look at the 4 games from this weekend, talk through them all, pick our players of the week, update our power rankings, and talk about any other CFL news. You can join us live on YouTube, the Canadian Football Countdown, Facebook.com/CF Countdown Pod, Twitter @CF Countdown Pod, Twitch.tv/CF Countdown Pod, and on the Game Time TV YouTube page. Shout out to our presenting sponsor there. So that's Monday night, same time, 9 p.m. Winnipeg, 8 p.m. Saskatchewan. Adjust to other time zones accordingly. And then on Wednesday night, we'll be back here again with a preview, just like this one, previewing everything from week number 3. As I mentioned, you can find the podcast on social media, Twitter @CF Countdown Pod. Make sure you check out all the other great shows from around the Canadian Football Podcast Network as well, @CF Pod Network on Twitter. Where can guys find you guys on social media? Adam, let's start with you.
Well, you can find me at Adam Stewart 1. I'll be sitting around probably this evening and celebrating a Game 1 victory in overtime against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Thank you, Andre Barakowski. Anyways, I'll just leave it at that. We might have to do a watch party one day here for Game 4, or when it's an elimination game here, Ryan. And watch live with Adam and Ryan. Yeah, that would end well. So, you can find me at Adam Stewart 1. We'll talk hockey, talk CFL, talk farming, and, whatever else is going on. Trey, how about where people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at TreyMBHarness. I'm one of the go-to guys for horse racing in the province. Well, I wouldn't say that, but definitely harness racing. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if you can't catch me here, you can catch me watching Assiniboia Downs. You can catch me watching harness racing all week. And anything you can bet on, UFC, hockey, football. Talk to me, Star Wars, Marvel, Obi-Wan last night. Anyone wants to talk to me about Obi-Wan, hit me up. It was great. That's where you can find me, at TreyMBHarness.
Right on, guys. 4 games, Adam. Let's not go there. You can find me on Twitter at CooperTrooper42, talking CFL Fantasy, maybe a bit of hockey here as well. Hoping the Lightning can bounce back and make this a good series here in the finals. For the podcast, whatever podcast platform you're listening on, we always appreciate if you do all the fun things such as like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, share the show with your friends, help us grow the show. Join us live in the live chat. If you're listening to the podcast version, make sure you subscribe over on YouTube. We stream these live every Monday and Wednesday night. Doesn't come out in the podcast feed till the next morning, so you get earlier access. You also get to join us live and chime in on the chat. We love getting comments and questions there along the way as well. Always appreciate anybody who listens or watches the show. Enjoy week number 2 in the CFL. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening. On behalf of Trey Colbeck, Adam Stewart, I say take care. Have a good one. Bye.